All right, welcome to today's webinar on study in Canada. We're going to look at all of what it takes to study in Canada from school search, to school admission process and then to visa application process. Of course, there are several things in between this, right? But we're going to take a step at one step at a time. And at the same time, we'll also look at the new immigration policies, that was put in place, by the Canadian government concerning international students who are planning to relocate to Canada in 2025 and also in 2026. Recently, there was this immigration policies that was put in place. A lot of people don't know about it, but we're going to look at that as well. Then also the postgraduate work permit, that you may apply for after you're studying Canada. So all of these things we're going to look at in great detail, and I would like you to stay to the end of this webinar. The webinar is just for 30 minutes. Lots of concise information to give. We're not going to totally say everything in this webinar because time may not really permit us. And toward the end of the webinar, you may have your questions to ask, but at the same time, we probably may have to some certain expatiate on some certain things that we didn't quite major in, during the course of the webinar. So we're going to begin now, and I'd love you to stay to the end so that you get to know much more. Now, we're talking about studying in Canada, and Canada is a fascinating place to be with. I mean, top graduate, the top schools, universities, colleges are actually in Canada. You find lots of schools there, lots of colleges, to actually study in. It has 10 territories. It has three territories and, 10 provinces you would may want to choose to study in, right? There are several places like Ontario province, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, British Columbia. So all of these provinces, a lot of people actually may want to stay in the state capital, but sometimes some people, maybe because of the cost of living, they may want to choose other provinces that may not really be high for living cost. And then we also look at the popular cities in Canada. We have Calgary, we have Halifax, Vancouver. All of these places are really, one of the major cities to actually stay in. Winnipeg is in Manitoba, Calgary is in Alberta. You have Vancouver, which is in British Columbia. So all of these places, you could choose to study in. And then, of course, the culture and society there, Canada boasts a multicultural heritage because of the several migrates that has really come into the country, from India, from several different parts of the world. So the immigration process, for the past years has really been welcome. They have lots of people from diverse culture who have really come into Canada, and and in turn that has really built the diversity of culture in the country. Now, why should you consider studying in Canada? First of all, the qualification valid around the world. In other words, the certificate you obtain in schools in Canada can be recognized and used anywhere in the world. And of course, they have the universities and colleges there are top ranked in the world, and you don't have you have high profile professors and even facilities you are exposed to in learning. And then of course you can find affordable education there depending on the school, depending on the province as well. And then of course depending on the program, the course you're going for. And the more multicultural society, we talked about that. Then another important thing also is the post-study work visa you obtain when you're done with school. So when you're done with school, you can apply for a postgraduate work permit, and every program is eligible for a postgraduate work permit, except if your school is not under the DLI, which is the Designated Learning Institute, then you cannot obtain a postgraduate work permit. Then possibility of permanent residency, absolutely. So in Canada, within 2 to 3 years of your study, after your study, you're eligible to process for a, a permanent residency, and this permanent residency can be obtained through the provincial nomination path program or through the express. Okay, these are the two major ways that you can obtain your PR after your study in Canada. And really, this is one of the high points why people are looking forward to Canada so that they can obtain their PR as quickly as possible. Now, these are the process of how you can study in Canada from academic IELTS. Well, IELTS, is not so compulsory now because some schools have really declined on the acceptance. So you can actually apply to some schools without the IELTS or any other English proficiency. Yes. So you can start with your academic process. That means your school admission process, right? And then once you obtain your offer letter, that means your admission offer letter, you can then proceed to arranging your finances. That means your proof of funds, so that you can your proof of funds, which will help you to apply for your visa application. And then once that is in order, you can continue to make a tuition fee payment. That means the school would ask you to make a deposit, within a certain period of time, you know, before you can apply for your visa. Sometimes some schools may give you a conditional offer letter, and then that will be one of the conditions you may have to fulfill before you actually apply for a visa to obtain a final offer letter. And then the next step is for you to do a medical examination. You can front load your medicals before you apply for your visa. So these are the process you have to undergo throughout the process. And with us, you can consider it to be very seamless. Now, let's look at the education system in Canada. There are universities, there are community colleges, and then there are private colleges. Now, just to divide it into two, universities and colleges, right? There's universities and colleges in Canada. Um, you can actually apply to universities. Actually, if you're in Nigeria, it's synonymous with how we have it in Nigeria. Universities and colleges, right? Universities and colleges, the way we have it in Nigeria. University is more of like theoretical, while colleges is more of practical. And then in Canada as well, you can find affordable tuition fees in colleges, um, universities too can be a bit higher than what is usually obtained. Also, in the universities too, you are dealing with programs like bachelor's degree, master's degree. That's what you're dealing with in the universities. But in colleges, you're looking at the diploma, right? That means an undergraduate diploma. And then you're also going to be looking at a postgraduate diploma, and um, just these are actually the programs that they run in the colleges, right? Postgraduate diploma and then college diploma. That means you can have a 2 years diploma or even a 3 years diploma, 3 years diploma or even a 4 year diploma. Okay, and even a 2 years diploma as well. Okay. And then for universities too, I hope you can see my slide. And then for universities too, bachelor's degree and then master's degree and PhD program. How many universities are there in Canada? There are actually up to 98 universities in Canada. We partner with lots of universities there and even in colleges there. Top ranked universities in the world, you find them in Canada. You have the University of Alberta, University of Calgary, Ottawa University of Ottawa, or you can call it Ottawa University, anyone. And then we have the University of Waterloo. So these are some of the universities that we have, top ranked universities that you can find. And of course, the tuition fees too are not um, they are actually on the high side as well, depending on the kind of program that you are looking out for anyway. But really, these are one of the top ranked universities you can always find, when making your school search, if that is what you're looking out for. Then what are the levels of programs offered in the universities in Canada? Now, different programs, like I said, bachelor's, master's, PhD, and then that's for the universities. These are what you find available in universities. And then in community colleges, you find um, um, diploma, that's undergraduate diploma, then transfer, university transfer program, then even bachelor degrees. Some colleges offer bachelor degree and then postgraduate diploma. These are what you can find in these colleges, right? And then, so we're looking at it this way, so that it can be much easier for us to always um, expatiate on these things. Duration of this degree and diploma, actually, for the bachelor's degree, right? If the bachelor's degree is usually 4 years, master's degree is usually 1 to 2 years. So you can find master's degree of 1 year, you can find master's degree of 2 years. PhD program is 2 to 5 years, and then the postgraduate diploma you can have between 8 months to 2 years, right? 8 months to 2 years, and then undergraduate diploma is between 2 to 3 years. Okay, 2 to 3 years. That's how long you can find some undergraduate programs. Then the intake period available for Canada is actually in September and in January and then in May. So they operate three different intakes, three different intakes for study. Okay, September is usually called the fall period. January is usually called the spring period, and May is usually called the summer period. So these are the three major intakes you get to find, you know, in applying for a study in Canada. Then eligibility language requirement. Well, like I told you, there are some schools or lots of schools now in Canada that may not ask you for IELTS. Now that doesn't mean there are some schools that don't. Some schools do, but some schools don't ask you for IELTS. So if you're not looking at writing the IELTS, you can actually consider applying to those schools that would not ask you. However, if you have it, your search becomes more, uh, uh, much more broader because you can use your test to look for schools that can ask you for the IELTS and those that will not ask you for the IELTS to have something, much more to always consider. Then we'll look at the designated learning institute. Now, what it means is that there are schools um, in Canada actually that are not in designated learning students. Some are in, and you can find this in the IRCC website. So, in choosing schools in for Canada, it's not just to apply for schools. You have to consider if this school is in a DLI, that means in a designated learning institute. The advantage of this is that once you're done with your schooling, you would have you would get a postgraduate work permit. You'll be eligible. That's the right word. You'll be eligible for a postgraduate work permit. However, if you would not apply to schools in a DLI, then once you're done with your schooling, you have no eligibility of a postgraduate work permit except you actually enroll again to another school that is in the DLI. So DLI is highly important that you get to apply to schools in DLI. So let's look at criteria for international students to work while studying in Canada. Now, of course, for you to work while studying in Canada, you must have applied for a program that is 8 months and above. Okay, any program that is below 8 months is not eligible to work. You can't get a you can't for you can't get a work permit. That means your study permit cannot come with you working. Okay, but if your program is 8 months and above, and you're 8 months and above, then you're eligible to work while schooling in Canada. And of course, some of these programs you may apply for can also come with co-op or internship. And having those kind of programs really can also help you and assimilate you into the job market, so that right after your school you can get a job. And of course, some of these internship and co-op programs actually have um, are paid actually. That means they can even pay you while you're doing them. So which is a very good advantage for you. Now, what is the post-study work? What's the post-study work visa? Now, post-study work visa is actually the visa which guarantees your coming into Canada for schooling, right? And then some of these um, post-study visa actually is being granted according to the length of your program, right? So if you're going for a 2 years course, it's for 2 years. If you're going for a 1 year course, so it always actually works with the duration of time you may have to spend, during your schooling. Post study. So these are the different post study work visa. So less than 8 months, right? You know, your course being 8 months and above, right? Okay. So now let's also look at what are the expenses, okay, for 1 year, 1 year to study. Okay, but the expenses for 1 year to study in Canada. Now, just this is a brief estimate, right? We're going to look at um, but before I talk about this, right, let's also look at the documents required, right? The documents required for you to apply for the different programs in Canada. Now, for the different programs in Canada, like maybe the bachelor's degree and then the college undergraduate diploma, now, the basic requirement is for you to provide your WIAC results, your international passport, IELTS if applicable, then SOP statement of purpose, and then a letter of recommendation. Right? That is actually the basic requirements you need to apply for an undergraduate program. But a master's program, you're considering your academic qualifications. That means your certificate and then your transcript result, right? Alongside with your SOP, that's your statement of purpose, letter of recommendation. Sometimes depending on the school, they may want you to provide an essay writing, and then some other schools too. You probably may provide an IELTS where applicable, and then of course your international passport, like I said earlier, and then one or two other documents depending on the school, which probably depending on the course also you're actually applying for, depending on the course you're applying for. And then that could ascertain your admission. But this is actually the basic documents required for you to apply for school admission in these programs. Let's forge ahead. So I'm going to look at the 1 year course, right? Now, let me use the um, degree program as an instant. Now, looking at the degree program, um, we're looking at first of all the I now what is here is a tentative cost, right? The tentative cost of what it will cost you to study in Canada, right? A tentative cost of what it will cost you to study in Canada from start to finish. Now, firstly, is the IELTS, but remember I told you the IELTS is not compulsory. But if you're looking at writing the IELTS in Nigeria, the IELTS is 265,000 at the moment, right? And well, it depends anyway, the one you're writing. So whether the computer or the paper, 265 to 275,000. You have to consider that. Then another is the tuition. Now the tuition, an average tuition for a bachelor's degree or a master's degree can range between 20, okay, 20,000. Let me use the master's degree, 20,000 maybe to 25,000, okay. Or you can also find something lesser, but let me just use 20,000 as a round figure. And then but however, just because your tuition is 20,000, you won't be asked to pay the full amount. So there's a part tuition fees they would ask you to pay. Okay. And depending on the school anyway. So you just will pay the part tuition fees and then pay the remaining when you get over there. Then the next one is the living and accommodation. The living and accommodation now for Canada is called the living expense for Canada for 1 year, according to the Canadian government, is 20,635 Canadian dollars. So you need to prove that you have this living expense in your account before making your visa application. So it's one of the prerequisites um, for you to have before you process your visa application. Another thing you could also want to consider is your flights from Nigeria, which is about 2 million plus. Okay, now that will be after you gotten your visa, so you don't need to book prior before your visa. Okay, it's highly recommended. IRCC would also inform you to also book your visa after you've gotten to also book your flight after you've gotten your visa, not before getting your visa. Then another one is visa fee, okay, and biometrics. Now, this is another expense you may have to also incur. Now, visa fee for international students is 150 Canadian dollars. Now, biometrics is 85 Canadian dollars. So in total, you have to pay the two together when making your application. So 235 Canadian dollars. However, if you have done a biometrics, for Canada, maybe within 10 years, then while processing your visa, you may not have to do another biometric. So because biometrics is once in 10 years. And then, so in these are actually the tentative fee that you have to undergo. Then your medicals is about 70,000 plus naira. So that's and then there's nothing more again. There's nothing more again. So this is actually um, the tentative budget which you can look out for. Remember, where more of the money is coming. You have to put in more of the money is actually in the tuition that you have to pay. Depending on some school, there are some schools that may want you to pay $5,000 for tuition deposit, or even you know maybe 4,000, 7,000, as the case may be, for tuition deposit, right? And then all of that monies, you have to show it in your bank statement that you have this money in your bank statement. And that doesn't mean you have to travel with it, but they want to know the visa officer want to know that you have this money available with you, before your travel. And then all other expenses, um, some like the visa fee and biometric is something you have to pay while you're processing your visa, and then your medicals as well. So basically that is it. And of course, while you're working there, the minimum wage there also has increased a bit, and will depend on the province where you are. But it's possible that within the semester you must have, gotten money, gotten you must have worked, depending on your job anyway, and depending on the province where you are, for you to have paid your the remaining part of your tuition, which is not difficult at all, alongside with all of that expense that you have to take care of, like accommodation and some other expenses. So it's highly possible for you to migrate to Canada. You're working in Canada, and at the same time you're paying your tuition. Highly, highly possible. There are lots of people who are doing it already. It's not something difficult to do. What I mean by that is not difficult because um, there are jobs available, right? There are jobs available for you to work and even pay your tuition, especially if you're even in the tech field and in the healthcare sector. It's even much easier for you to get, jobs in that regard. And at the same time, when you're done with school, scale up on such kind of jobs. All right. So let's look at, we partner with lots of institution, um, lots of institution in Canada. We have plenty of institution. The list is not updated yet, but we have more. We have a lots of schools in Canada that we partner with, both universities and colleges. Now, scholarship is one thing that is very competitive in Canada. In Canada, some schools offer scholarships. Of course, if school is giving you a scholarship, it's not full scholarship. Neither is it will you get up to half scholarship. If eventually you would get up to full or half scholarship, that would happen in your eventual relocation in Canada. That means once you get there and your academic excellence is top notch, then they can consider you for a full scholarship, or even if not full, but at least something very highly substantial. But however, while you're doing your applications, some schools actually give students scholarship based on your current academic performance, and then sometimes when you fulfill some conditions like paying your tuition deposit at the before a certain date, given, that can also encourage some kind of scholarship for you. And this scholarship can also come for bachelor's degrees and even for master's degree as well. Then also, we'll look at some successful um, points to remember for successful offers and visas. Okay, in making your application for your visa, it's highly important that first of all you take note of your documentations. Your documentation goes a long way to ascertaining your visa outcome. Ensure you try to explain lots of detail. Now, firstly, your academic performance is really something very that could also give a good advantage your visa application, and then you explaining your work experience. That means what you have been doing, after you left school and between when you are submitting your visa application, what have you been doing? Your an elaborate explanation on that too, and something very very substantial that you are doing can actually give your application a very very good advantage. Then we're looking at students, maybe okay, maybe like explained, like maybe a gap here as well. You can also explain if you have a gap here, you can explain your gap here. So that the visa officer can understand, your progression, both academic and in your work. So do universities or colleges in Canada assist in job placement? Absolutely. Now there's something called co-op, and like I said earlier. So co-op is a way of integrating you. Now it doesn't mean it's a guarantee, but it helps to integrating students into the job market. So if you get programs that have a co-op, is a good thing, because while you're done with your schooling, you get to do your co-op, and then eventually the company can also hire you from there. So that's really okay. Then sources of finances. Now, sources of finances. What can be the sources of funds to study in Canada? Now, in your visa application to start with, if you're not two ways for you to show proof of funds or source of funds is self-funded, right, which I would highly recommend, especially if you're going for a master's program, and then maybe funds from parents or spouse, right? But most preferably, self-funding is really good for those going for a master's program, especially. Then submitting a winning application. Now, in terms of your visa process, we're considering, what will make your application to a very large extent, fly is first of all completing your application form very well. Academic records, right? That means how your academic records can really boost your um, the determination of your visa. Then standard examination scores. That means if you're going to be writing the IELTS, work experience details, if any. Now it's good that you put up work experience. That really helps. Application fees, if applicable. Um, these application fees now, right? Well, it depends anyway. SOP with and recommendation letters request for universities only. Now, sometimes some of the schools would want you to write an SOP. Not even some. Of course, if you're going to be writing, you're going to be in universities anyway. You will need to write SOPs, and so those SOPs really can really help you um, to in your visa application. That means they are looking at your motivation towards this kind of course that you're going for, and then that can also strengthen your visa application. Then, of course, your funding, which is not written here anyway, your funding actually your that means what do you have in your bank statement, what's available in your bank statement. That can also give your um, your application a very huge success. Now, this application we're talking about here is not so much of not only visa application but also school application as well. So I just combined the two and I spoke about them as well. So let's look at some IRCC updates. Now, IRCC update has changed. This is 2024, but IRCC update has changed, periodically, even in this year and into next year as well. But I'll just highlight some of these IRCC updates so that you can really take note while while applying for a visa. Now, first thing is that in January this 2024, they actually had to cut down the number of intakes of students who are coming into Canada. International students who are coming into Canada to 360,000, and the cap was more of in postgraduate diploma. That means they had to put a cap in more of postgraduate diploma and some bachelor's degree courses that that are would I say that are not part of the shortage programs, are not part of those careers where they have some kind of shortage in they had to decrease, or they had to put a cap there in those kind of programs. So if you would have to apply as a postgraduate diploma, or as postgraduate diploma student, or as a bachelor degree program, you have to get what they call a provisional attestation letter. This provisional attestation letter is from the province. The province, after you got your offer letter, you've paid your tuition fees, and then you want to apply for a visa, you then have to apply for a provisional attestation letter, so that that was one of the prerequisites now. However, new migration policy for 2025 and 2026 states, just recently was published just last week or 2 weeks ago, that for those who are international students who are also coming to Canada, you know, there's also a cap now for 475,000 people, or 437,000 people rather. There's a cap on 437,000 students which would be accepted into Canada for 2025 and 2026 intake period. In other words, and also master's degree holders, right? Master's degree holders and PhD holders would have to request for a provisional attestation letter for them to apply for their visa. So it's now for everybody, not just postgraduate diploma or some bachelor degree program. That means all bachelor degree program, all postgraduate degree program, all master's degree program, all PhD program will have to request for a provisional attestation letter before making the application for visa application. The second change which was done was the proof of funds. Now, this was done in December 2023 as against 2024, which was they increased the living expense from 10,000 for one applicant to 20,635 Canadian dollars. Now, this means that if you're traveling as just you have to prove in your visa application that you have 20,635 Canadian dollars in your bank account for your living expense. Of course, if you're traveling with more, um, with family, then the depending on the number of dependents, there are stipulated amounts you have to show as proof of funds. You can find that in the RCC website. Thirdly, spousal open work permits are actually available for those who are traveling for master's degree. And there's some other bachelor's program. However, the new recent immigration policy now has shown that if spousal open work permit actually available for master's program that are 16 months above. Okay, so it's actually for those who are applying for a master's program, or a program, not just a master's program, but a program that is 16 months above. Okay, of course, when IRCC gives some of this information, sometimes there could be a review on this information. So it may be that it may just be for master's program only, or maybe yeah, it's just for master. They stated it actually. Now I remember they stated it that it was just for spousal open work permit is available for master students. Okay, who actually have a 16 months program. That means if your master's program is less than 16 months, you will not be eligible for a spousal open work permit. Another update too that was given is the postgraduate work permit. Now, the postgraduate work permit still remains the same. However, new immigration policy has shown that in the coming months there will be a change, in the postgraduate um, work permit, except for those who are actually in those who are studying those courses that are in shortages, right? And even for master's program. So apart from that, all other and then those also who are also in public colleges too, remains unchanged, right? But apart from these, all other programs, there's a reconsideration on the postgraduate work permit required. So this is basically some of the changes, immigration changes that has happened in Canada. So this should help your application while you're making your application, and it also helps you to start early and also put up a very proper documentation, on your school application and as well as your visa application. All right. So at this moment, we'll round it up and take some of your questions. Now, remember, there are some benefits too that you may have to know about traveling to Canada, which is very very good. The postgraduate. Remember, I told you about the postgraduate work permit you get. Now, if you're applying for a master's program, you actually have a 3 years postgraduate work permit that will be like that you're eligible for, and then a permanent residency, right? You have a permanent residency pathway, 2 to 3 years permanent residency pathway for international students. Now what do I mean by that? In other words, within 2 to 3 years, you can obtain a permanent residency while in Canada. So Canada is a very promising country to study and to live in, and I want you to consider this, in making your application, because there are several opportunities, when it comes to work, especially if you're in the STEM field, science, tech, engineering, mathematics. You can consider Canada as one of your top destination countries to study in. All right.